Hello, and welcome back to Conscious Caregiving, where we're tackling the tough conversations. Today's topic is seniors and the holidays. I am Lance Slatton, the co-host of Conscious Caregiving with L&L, as well as the host of All Home Care Matters, and also a senior case manager for Enrich Life Home Care Services. We're glad to have you back with us for another important discussion, and I'd like to introduce my esteemed co-host, Miss Lori LeBay.
Well, hi, everyone. I am Lori LeBay, and I am thrilled to be here. We have gotten a lot of requests to talk about seniors and holidays and how do you transition with all of that. But before we go into that, I'll give you a little background because we've taken a little detour today, and you're just going to see Lance and I talk. We thought between the two of us in our history with work and personal experience that we could probably handle this, give you a good idea. This is a topic that we could talk about for a week straight and not be able to answer everyone's questions. So keep that in mind, but I think that you will get a lot of really good information. And one of the things we want to stress is there is no one answer. Just like there is no one answer with any type of medical diagnosis. Everyone is different. Everybody's family traditions and things, sprint off in different areas. And so, we're going to be talking in general, on this topic. So for myself, I cared for my mom who had dementia for 30 years, my dad who had brain cancer, and many people sprinkled in between. In addition, I worked in the developmentally abilities arena for about 10 years. And then when I sold real estate for 25, my focus actually was seniors. So I had a lot of interactions in terms of helping seniors and families, not only with their traditions or transitions, but with their life in general, how to live their best life, because that was really one of my goals. And Lance, do you want to tell people a little deeper in terms of your personal and professional experience with caregiving? Give people a little more background.
Absolutely, Lori. Well, similar to yours in the sense, I didn't start off as planning to be a caregiver, never identified as a caregiver until my father became ill, unbeknownst to myself and my family. And we got a call one evening from a home health care nurse that he needed more help than what the home health care visits were able to provide him with, and that we needed to make some adjustments and accommodations. So he ended up coming to live with my wife and I. My wife had recently had started her professional career, was done with college. I was in the midst of pursuing medical school at the time for what my professional career was intended to be. And that all changed, and the trajectory of my life changed dramatically beyond my wildest dreams when all of a sudden now, even though I didn't identify as a caregiver, I was there providing literally 24/7 care for my father. And I'd gone through from the peripheral edges, caregiving for my grandmother who lived with my mom and myself and my family before I was on my own with her dementia. This was an entirely different environment. Now, it's my home and my father's the one needing, constant continuous care. And, what has always struck me and has stuck with me since that time was never once were we given any tips, resources, or support outside of the clinical support. And, that led us to starting our home care company, our YouTube show. And one thing I'm adamant about, and that's why I'm so excited about today's topic, is helping these families with the resources and tips that they need that most aren't getting when they're getting that diagnosis. And one of our friends who was on the show recently didn't create the phrase, but I like to use it, and that's you get a diagnose and an adios. That's all you're getting once you get that diagnosis. So, I'm just happy to provide help however we can.
Yeah, and my story is kind of similar with Alzheimer's Speaks. I thought, where's the service products and tools? You give us the diagnosis and you give us this medical speak, but you're not telling us how to live well with the disease when we leave the office. And that just saddened my heart so much. And at first I thought it was just us. And then you realize it's everyone is being treated like this. And granted, over the years it's changed, but we still have a long, long ways to go. So today we want to really, in the spirit of family tradition, we want to be able to give you as much information as we can from both our personal and our professional experiences. Again, every family is different. Every event or gathering, culture, everything is different. And so that's okay. But I will say, to start this off, don't be like me. I kind of ignored the fact that my parents were aging. And I did that by saying old was 10 years older than them, because then I didn't have to think about the changes. And that leaves you really just waiting for a crisis to happen. And so, we want you to go in with your eyes wide open, and hopefully with some creativity too, because, you have to be respectful and full of gratitude. We want to help you try to maintain traditions, but sometimes those have to swing a little bit one way or the other. And that's fine. That's, part of adapting to life. The other thing that I want to mention to people before we kind of dive in is we've been getting a lot of requests, people wanting to ask questions. And so feel free to go to our website, or you can make comments in the YouTube section as well in the comments with questions that you would like us to ask over time. Same with topics. You've been rolling in with different topics, and this one has gotten a lot of attention. So please feel free to do that. I think we should start, Lance, by talking about the type of events, because there's such a variety. So let's first talk about the three main ones kind of that I identified, and let me know if you think of some others. Is planning an event in your own home. So maybe you're having the senior come to yours, maybe you're going to the senior's home, or maybe you're going to someone who is placed in a broader community.
Right.
Or you're going kind of on a vacation, hotel cruise type thing there. Let's start with planning an event at let's start at planning an event at a senior's home, because a lot of times that's the tradition. They've always had it at their house, and it takes a while sometimes for that wand to pass. What would be some of your recommendations for people to consider if, and I'm just going to use mom and dad are having, this could be an aunt and uncle. It doesn't make any difference who the person is, but they're going to continue to try to have the holiday or gathering in their own home.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lori. I think, maintaining those traditions first and foremost are why you're going to have the event to begin with. You'll have those childhood memories, early adulthood, through adulthood memories, those special occasions. But as our loved ones get older, sometimes it becomes too much for them to host those events. But in the event of traditions, you can continue having them there, but make sure that your loved one has support and help in order to do so. You don't want somebody that maybe is dealing with arthritis or vision issues, physical limitations, to feel like they have to be the host and do everything on their own. Talk to the family, whoever is involved with the event. Find a couple, might even only be one, that will volunteer to say, you know what, and I'm going to use a mom as an example. I'll work with mom this week. We'll go to the grocery store. I'll find out what she needs. She may even need the house tidied up, because she doesn't want guests to come and see it a mess, and just let her know that you're going to support and help her get through it, accomplish it, and so that it's successful and everybody can enjoy it, especially mom. One of the things with us, with our company, anytime we go to a senior's home and their children are wanting to hire us to help their mom, their dad, or maybe it's both of them, one of the biggest things they always say is, it's really hard for mom to let people come in the home. There's a lot of reasons, but this one always stands out. She feels like she has to entertain and be the host. And, we explain, no, she just needs to sit back and we will help her with whatever she needs. She doesn't have to entertain us. And I think coming together as, a unit, if you will, for the family and the friends that are going to be at the event. Work together to coordinate. Don't make mom feel like she has to go do all the grocery shopping, all the cooking, the baking, all the cleaning. Let her know it's going to be a team effort. And I think that will take a lot of weight off of mom. But also, it might even be safer in that instance. Maybe mom shouldn't be trying to go out to the grocery store and load and unload groceries and, things like that.
Yeah, there's so many elements. The other one I was thinking of when you were talking, because I agree with all of them, was but communication,
Yeah.
making sure everybody is in the loop and knowing what is going on. And I loved when you said, allowing them kind of that independence, but supporting them, and so that it's comfortable. And I think it's a good time to talk about passing the wand. Like mom, when did you start taking over for your mom? And have that conversation, because it is a natural transition. But yet it can be a really uncomfortable one, because people all of a sudden look at it like, oh, you don't think I'm capable. And it's like, no, it's really not about not thinking that you're not capable. It's just that one person shouldn't have to do this their whole life,
Right.
and take that load on, because it really is a lot. The other thing I would add too is a lot of times as we age, people can start having some cognition issues there. And I know with my own mom, all of a sudden, she loved to cook, but instead of putting in a pinch of sugar, all of a sudden it's the whole thing of salt, mixing things up. But my mom did not like anybody in her kitchen. So that was a tough one. The only one she would let in her kitchen was me. And so you have to respect those things too, because they're so important. And I think the other thing we can do, like when you were talking about cooking and cleaning and shopping, we can introduce new traditions that can be fun. So it's not just chore oriented, going shopping with them, making the menu together, the baking and the cooking. A lot of times people have their cookie bake-offs and things like that. But there's different ways to be able to do those. Maybe it's not baking all the cookies. Maybe everybody bakes some at home and you're only going to do one or two together. So it's not an all day event, because I think stamina has to come into play. Numbers of people can change, noise levels. I know for myself, I'm 64, and I notice noise levels more, or background. So if it's a large group, or if there's a lot of kids and they're laughing and giggling, which you want the kids to do, but sometimes that can be wearing on an elder as well. So being able to have maybe a quiet area to go to that's safe, and people don't point it out, but just let them know that they need that right now. Maybe go with them. And for my mom, I would say, gosh, it's kind of noisy in here. Do you mind if I just scoot, into the den, and do you want to come with me? And then she's helping me out. And yet I know I'm helping her calm down too, and everything still is moving along, and people know what we're doing, instead of where'd they go? What's going on?
Right.
Type thing, or going for a walk. Can make a big difference. What has your experience been like with decorations? We're coming into some real major holidays. I mean, we just rolled out a Halloween, and I know that the younger crowd probably does more Halloween decorating than our elders. But we've got Christmas and Hanukkah, and there seems to be a lot of stuff that comes out. Do you see some pluses and minuses with all of that?
Some of the pluses is, again, carrying on a tradition. They, I feel like they also feel like they're maintaining more of that independence or that individuality by continuing to carry on with, doing their decorating and things like that. Some of the negatives are, going downstairs, going up into an attic or wherever the decorations are kept. If the loved one is limited by mobility or physical restraint, offer to help them. Or, I'll give you an example. My grandmother, before she came to live with my mom and I and my sister, she was 7 hours away, 6.5, 7 hours away. And, the local church would have their youth group come and help her, even with like leaf pickup, and then offer to do her decorations. And, she felt in turn that she was helping her church, not realizing it's really a benefit and a help to her, though I'm sure she realized it, but didn't really look at it in that aspect. Just making sure what they're doing, they are safe. When you get into decorations, you got ladders sometimes involved, a lot of cords that could be easily tripped over, or just like you said, Lori, the noise. This could be overstimulation by the overwhelming amount of boxes and cords. And if they're not neatly put away, they're tangled. It could have a negative effect in that way as well. But, their safety is first and foremost. We have families that we help, and the staff, they'll go to the basement to carry up, the next, package of paper towel, or bring up, whatever it is from the basement, so that person that they're caring for isn't taking that risk of going down those steps and tripping and falling. Even if they're physically able, we're talking all physical, but the vision as well. Your acuity for depth perception is totally skewed as you age, and they might miss a step, or they could get unbalanced, or just get lightheaded from, the strain of going up the stairs. So I would look at, offering that assistance, offering that support. You will know your loved one better than Lori and I will. Just identify if you think things are safe or unsafe as it pertains to doing decorations and carrying boxes and things down or up from the basement or attic.
Yeah, that's really good. When you mentioned, ladders and step stools, the other area where people use that sometimes are higher shelves in the kitchen. They might have like Christmas, dishes or different things that are hidden, and those things really need to be moved lower, because that can be a huge hazard. And it's one of those things we normally don't know because they just always have handled it. And so it's really a good thing to kind of step into this before it's really needed, so that you can learn, what's going on. I would add the flashing lights. Some people might still have the old color wheels, which are a fire hazard. Get rid of that thing because they stall out, and you don't want that to happen. And then we have those sensory decorations that yap at us when we go by, that can be really startling to people, when those are turned on, or frustrating when you don't know how to turn it off and it just keeps quacking at you or doing whatever, with that. I found that interesting. And then earlier you had mentioned like arthritis, even like wrapping presents and things can be more difficult. I know at our house we would, our family, the girls would always go shopping. Mom would come with us, and then she would pick out what she wanted. And then we would take it, we would wrap it, we would bring it, and it was from them. She was involved in it, but she didn't have to get into the nitty gritty of that. And that she enjoyed that, because it was an outing, for us to do it together. But it just got to be a lot,
Right.
for everybody, and, with that. So, yeah, I think that those are really good points that we've brought out so far. The other thing, when you are entertaining in your own house, you have to look at who else is coming, because there might be other elders. You might be concerned about your mom and dad, but it might be your aunt and uncle that
Yeah.
you have to consider too. So even things about bathrooms in lighting, and sometimes people will have a candle going. Is that safe? If there's kids and elders, that might not be the safest thing. It might be a sensory light, or leaving the light on or the door open so people can find it easily, or not having all those rugs, which is hard. We both live in the Midwest, and we get the snow and the slush and all of that, but those can be tripping hazards
Yeah.
for people as well. Same with all the decorations. Sometimes it can just get to be a little bit much, and you don't know something's, right before you. And I like, if people can be there as people come greeting. So not just doing necessarily stuff the night before, but being there earlier. Or maybe it's decided that, mom's not going to do all the cooking, and everyone's going to bring stuff. And maybe you want to even set a time frame that that things get there,
Right.
so that no one's stewing over missing items. I know that happens sometimes with my family. Like, really, I can't even bring the buns, what's going on? But there's all those little triggers kind of within families and things. So
I would add too, just real briefly, Lori, if I could jump in for a second, is getting into the home. A lot of homes with families that we're helping, and even in our own family, sometimes the steps getting into the front door could be very dangerous. You want to make sure that there is a plan in place if your loved one cannot do steps. Help support them. I know a workaround even in our own family that we do with this family member, instead of doing the steps into the house, they will actually walk around and use the grass because there's no steps there. And we will get on side by side of this person, and grab an arm just in case, grass is not safe either. It could be bumpy or a hole or whatnot. But just making sure that there's a safe entrance for them to get into the home.
yeah, making sure if you have the cold weather and the ice, that you've got salt and things there. We used to, as my mom progressed, I mean, there was a time where it would be like a two-person lift sometimes to get one of our elderly family members into the house. They kind of do the fireman lift, one on each side. And we've done, the wheelchair kind of bump up type thing. But we've snuck them in different ways with less steps too.
Right.
Like you did, looking at alternatives, and then making sure that they have any mobility assistance inside the home. So, maybe once they're in, maybe they need a walker, maybe they need a cane, making sure that there's paths for that, or even thinking about chairs people are going to sit in. If they have arms, or if they don't have arms, it's more difficult for people, to get out. And then I would say also thinking about the potential of incontinence. Is there an issue with that? Having a backup plan, an extra outfit, ready to go, and incontinence products in case you need them. Because you might not know. That's really personal. And a lot of times they won't admit if they are using something like that. And so you've got to find a dignified way to be able to deal with that with everyone. Anything else in the house? I mean, we've covered a lot.
I think that pretty much covers the most important things. And I would just say too, if you do have a pet or pets, making sure they're not going to create a fall hazard, because a lot of our dogs and things, not so much cats, they like to run up, and, some are bigger and they'll just jump up on you. Just be cognizant of that they might accidentally jump up on your loved one and they could fall potentially.
Yep. Or steal food.
Or steal food.
Depending on how the situation works, if you're sitting at the table, or if people have plates on their lap or little TV trays, or, everyone's set up a little bit different, but all of that stuff makes a difference for sure. And that they are able to be let out. They need to be put in the equation with everything.
Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, let's talk about if someone is living in a senior community, and I mean, that could be an independent, it could be anything from independent to, memory care or skilled care. What are some things you think families should think about there? Because I know a lot of times people still want to take them out. And that isn't always the right thing to do, is what I found personally.
Right. Well, absolutely. Again, I'll just use our professional experiences. Oftentimes families that we're helping in these types of communities, they'll say, we'd like to take mom out on Friday. It's Christmas Eve. Can the caregiver come along? Then, that does help tremendously. We always remind them, talk to the facility's nurse and make sure that mom has the medications that she'll need if she's going to be out during the time she's supposed to receive some type of medication. But aside from that, talk with the facility, talk with the loved one's physician, get their input. Maybe it's been months since mom or dad or the loved one has been taken out publicly. Just know what you're in for. The intentions are great, but If there's, cognitive issues or physical issues or, more medical type issues, you want to know how to plan and prepare for yourself if you're going at it alone. It might be different if you have a professional caregiver that's going along who already understands your loved one's routine and their needs. But if you're going in half blind because you haven't done this before, you want to have some very serious conversations with the facility staff and your loved one's physician, just so you know how to respond and prepare accordingly. Because you don't want to be in the middle of a restaurant and, maybe mom's sugar drops dramatically, maybe it goes up dramatically, or maybe, she's having some type of, cognitive issue and begins screaming in the restaurant, or she becomes incontinent and you're not prepared for that. So how do you address that? Just knowing what you're in for and how to best prepare for it. And above all else, I think getting medical advice or recommendation on whether or not that's in your loved one's best interest to take them out, especially if you're in the Midwest like Lori and I. It can get bitterly, bitterly cold, and you don't want your loved one to contract pneumonia or have some sort of respiratory issue because, as we get older and more frail, things that, maybe you and I can kind of ward off and deal with a little bit better, it might be really severe for an older elderly loved one.
Oh, exactly. Well, the other thing too, I love that you mentioned, maybe having a professional, because one of the things, that we experienced was my mom always liked to come out. So we would bring her home. And yet we found sometimes over time, she couldn't last as long as she used to. And so then someone has to be willing to leave early and bring her back. Or if you're having, we went from us doing that to her needing actual transportation to do that, but having that flexibility in order to do that, being able to know if there's, again, restrooms, parking, walking, lighting, all of those types of things, if you're taking them out. But we found over time that we could just, and it was much easier, and mom was much more comfortable. We came to her. We just brought everything. We reserved a room, and everybody had a good time. And if mom, fell asleep, sometimes she would fall asleep in the room, and I don't know how, because we would get pretty loud and stuff. And then she'd wake up and she'd pop back in again,
Yeah.
but we were all together. It was different. Everybody kind of brought food. They let us bring food in. Some communities, you can order a meal through the kitchen, and do that. But I found the communities are very accommodating, but in the holidays, get those dates on the books early because everyone's kind of thinking the same thing. The other thing I found when mom was living in a community, and same with my dad, we tried really hard to do the traditional gatherings, but sometimes it's best to break that apart. Let the family do the tradition, and then everyone kind of comes and visits. So maybe somebody would come. Let's say we're having the big party at my house, and so somebody in the family would swing by and visit mom or dad or both, in their community before they came. And then someone would swing by. Sometimes they'd swing out midway and then come back. And then others would swing by when they left, or on different days. But that allowed them to get all of the visits when it became too overwhelming for them to be in big groups. And that is something that is difficult to admit that it's happening. But I think it's essential, because I think our goals are, we want them to be, safe and happy, and we want them to celebrate. And sometimes that's just easier in a smaller group. Sometimes when, as we age, a lot of times people have, and I know there's plenty of seniors that will argue with this, that they have less activities and interactions. And there's others that say, oh my gosh, since I retired, I've never been so busy in my whole entire life,
Yeah.
so everyone's on a different swing point with that. But that is something that is, really important. Other ways we can engage too are making sure that we send cards, and that can be us as adults, as friends, That can be neighbors, that can be people at church, just reminding people, just drop a card. It could be our grandkids or their great grandkids that are sending those little pick me up, perk me up, sending flowers, just because are really nice reminders as well. Um, but I think there's so many, again, variables, and that transportation, if you're taking them out, is really important. So one of the things that I found, like I used to drive a big conversion van, and that was, mom had to like crawl up in that thing, and then somebody else would have a really low vehicle and she'd like fall into it, but then it's like, how are we going to get her out of it, type thing. And flexibility changes. And so for me, I found kind of my Trailblazer was the perfect size, and I could adjust the seat up or down, so it was easy for her to slide in and be able, there were handles to hold on to and things. And that even can get complicated over time. Making sure that the seats, some people sit way back, don't do that. Have the back up, because they'll a lot of times will just fall back. And you need to know their physicality. Do they have a bad back? That could really hurt,
Right.
Something like that. So there's so much detail. And I think we have to get out of anytime we're dealing with this. And I think, it's a nice thing to do throughout life is what I say, don't just care, but consciously care. Look at the big picture, look at all the things that might be trigger points for them, and for yourself, because they're going to react to how you react. And a lot of times we think we're covering up our reaction, but they're catching our roll of the eyes or our sighs. And, those don't make people feel good.
Right.
So we have to be conscious of how are we dealing with all of this as well.
One thing I would add too, if you're taking them out from the facility for an outing, sometimes, and every facility is different, of course, but if the staff wheel them out to the vehicle and then they help get them situated in the car, or if they don't, ask for that assistance. The staff is more than happy to help you get them into the vehicle. But my point here is, if they need a walker or a wheelchair, once they get them in the car, they're going to take the facility's wheelchair back into the building. Don't leave and forget to take a walker or a wheelchair if your loved one needs one, and make sure you know how to use it too. Because sometimes people struggle, and especially if it's a person not overly strong, they might have trouble picking that wheelchair up, folding it up, and putting it in their vehicle. So just, learn all of the tips and tricks with walkers and wheelchairs too before you leave, and make sure you take one with you if your loved one needs it.
Yeah, that's good. And I always had a bag like with extra clothes and incontinence products and things like that too. And if I needed it, great. And if I didn't, it took little time to pull together, but that that can be really, really helpful too. The other thing you had kind of mentioned, maybe going out to eat, in a restaurant or something. Again, I think checking on parking and how far of a walk is it in, even where are you situated? Because sometimes people have a hard time walking long distances, and knowing where the bathroom is, or is it a sit down order? Is it just a meal that's coming and set? Is it a buffet? My mom loved her dearly and she loved a buffet, but she got to the point with her cognition is she'd be in line and she's like, oh, this looks good. And then she'd put that plate down because she'd spat something else. And then she'd go run over there and it was like, I remember one time literally she had 5 plates and was like, okay, we can't do the buffets anymore, and so we had to change over time how ordering in our food came. Initially she could still read. And sometimes, I have a hard time sometimes, and I'm sitting there with my phone with my flashlight, trying to read a menu because they can be high gloss or it can be dark and all of those types of things. But then it got to the point where we went to some place where she was familiar and she would order the same thing. And then it got to the point where she would forget what she ordered, and she'd be upset when it came because she changed her mind. So then what I ended up doing was I would say, gosh, Mom, I can't make up my mind at all. would you mind, maybe we pick two things and we just share them and up my odds that what was there she would be comfortable with. But more importantly, she was helping me and she felt purposeful, and that alone calmed things down a lot. But even like cutting food, if somebody needs help, or maybe they need special utensils, making sure that you bring those with, or analyzing even types of food, no matter where it's at. Is finger food, better than a big fancy meal with lots of things on the table? If someone's having tremors and, is spilling a glass of wine or breaking a glass, is that going to be upsetting,
Yeah.
to somebody? All of those types of things have to be considered too. We also run into situations where people are going to maybe go to a vacation home, and they're going to celebrate there, or they're going to, meet for a weekend at a hotel or a week. What kinds of suggestions do you have for something like that when it's a new environment?
When it's Well, and I would refer to an episode that you and I just did, Seniors in Travel, because there's some great recommendations on there. But first and foremost, pack appropriately. Depending on the climate, our elderly loved ones tend to get colder easier. So what might be warm to us might be a little chilled for them. But making sure you go through a checklist, everything your loved one's going to need from, if they do use incontinence products, making sure you have those, making sure you have all the proper medication that they're currently taking. And then also I believe in, preparing them and start talking about it, because again, as you know very well, Lori, taking a person, if it is a dementia related issue that they're dealing with, putting them in that strange new environment, and we talked about this on Seniors in Travel, it could be too overwhelming for them. Where, I believe it was one of our guests, Lori, was saying, she takes time and really just absorbs it, because even for her, it can be overwhelming. Just making sure that you're planning accordingly, making sure you know all of your loved ones' needs and what they require. Because again, harking back to our professional examples, we have families who live in other states, and it might be just the Christmas time where they get to see their loved one, and they'll have an occasional phone call with the physician or with their caregiver, but they haven't had that one-on-one reality with their loved one, which is entirely different than just getting reports over the phone. Making sure you understand what your loved one's needs are and what their current abilities and inabilities are in this day and age, not what it was the last time you visited them, because they could have changed.
Oh, easily. Yeah, easily. One of the things Lori had mentioned on our travel was she always has sunglasses handy, and either a
You're
headset or earbuds, just to, get rid of the noise, and kind of noise canceling with her headsets and stuff. And, the sunglasses, even inside, like at the airports, just for the flashing lights and things, was really distracting for her. She also has routines where and she has this on her website, Dementia Days, how she packs her clothes. So she puts everything on a hanger, and she puts it on in the order she puts it on. So her underwear and bras on the outside, and so that she makes sure she puts things on in the correct order. So someone can still be independent in doing those types of things, but really knowing their routines. When do they eat breakfast? What do they like? Do they eat a big lunch or a small one? Do they snack? Having those types of things, and just things to entertain, if it's music or whatever, to be calming, is important. And then understanding too, if you're in a hotel, or a lot of times people will, maybe, like I said, go to a vacation home, and they've done it for 30 years and they love going there. And I ask them, and of course they want to go, but now they go and they're not as comfortable there. And again, especially if you're dealing, and not everyone has cognition issues, but that can change, where they don't remember, the layout. They don't remember the people, maybe getting a portable like door alarm. There's different safety issues, and even I always recommend, I don't care if you're going to the gas station, the grocery store locally, or you're going to Europe, having those IDs,
Yeah.
in medical emergency stuff. And those are things people don't really think about. But knowing that different environments can throw people for a loop, and especially in bathrooms, making sure, that they're comfortable and they know where grab bars are and things, because a lot of times in the hotels everything's white, and that can be an issue with people with that are starting to have visual issues,
Right.
in things. So I'm going to switch because I can't believe how much we've talked, and we have so many other topics we really want to cover on this. But one of the things that I think is really important, and I'd love your input on it, is to make a list of what has worked well in the past and why, and also a list of what are some unwanted things that have occurred and why is that. I think the whys are really important, but I think so often we don't think about that. We just think of, well, we want to have a good time, we're going to get everyone together, but no one's thinking about past history. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's absolutely important, especially, I think we learn from experience often. And if you've gone on a trip or, did an event with a loved one in the past, maybe it was the previous year, and, remember dad absolutely didn't like when all the music started playing so late at night because he was already overcompensating from being exhausted and it really threw him into a tizzy. Or remember, we forgot whatever the product or thing is that you want to fill in the blank with. We got to remember at this time, because we didn't have it and this is what happened. Going through and just having as detailed of a checklist as you can and noting the reasons for having those items is vitally crucial. And then having the unwanted things, you also don't want to overpack either, and you don't want to take things that, could be upsetting. Maybe you took your loved one on a trip or, an event or a holiday gathering at your home, and maybe the spouse had just recently passed and they saw that, and then, they just became very depressed and, almost hysterically crying because they saw that picture. Maybe you want to put that picture away just so you don't cause them to become upset. Just trying to remember the things that works and the things that are needed versus some things that you may encounter that just didn't help, or things that you took that you thought would be a help and they ended up not serving any purpose, but just took up more space in the suitcase.
Yeah. Well, and I think talking with the members of the family, because somebody like taking down I'm not taking down mom or dad's picture, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And it's like, again, thinking of big picture of what's going to make the event or the gathering good for everyone, and explaining, we're going to put this away because it's going to make mom or dad feel more comfortable and it's not going to be a trigger. It's not that we don't want them, participating in others talking about them, but we have to understand. And some people will grieve and they'll be fine with it, but there are some people that just, it'll put them over the edge.
Right.
And then that kind of destroys the whole point of trying to pull that joy and things together. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, trying to figure out your standard family traditions. We all like, well, that's just what we do. But we have to, like I say, kind of consciously care, and we have to think of who really attends and how do they attend, because that makes a big difference too. Who are the decision makers in the group? It's always nice to get everyone's input, but sometimes that's not realistic because people, not all family members see what you see, or care at the level that you care. And so kind of knowing those positions, I think, are really important. And then asking people for input, in terms of what they like, because if you are going to start adjusting things, I think that it's good to have a conversation. But again, you might have people in your family where you can't have that conversation.
Right.
Not everybody's family is on the same page. And then you might have someone go, well, then I'm just not coming. If we're not doing what we've always done, that's just not fair. And you have to be prepared for your answer for that on what are you going to do. And again, it might come out where the family tradition goes on and maybe others who are willing do something separate with your loved one, or maybe you're going to tackle being the one that is responsible for them and will leave the party early, and get them transported both ways, and be really tied to them. And so it's going to affect your outcome, but that's your choice to make. I know I did that many times, and but I would do that all again. I mean, I think of all the things my folks had done for me, but I also know not every family has had that type of relationship,
Yeah.
with their loved ones that they're caring for, so that makes a difference. And I think also talking about, again, if you can project of things that you really that everybody really wants to continue, things that people are willing to adapt to, and things that you just think this has to drop. We can't do this. There's not a workaround. Because if you identify those things and know your whys, you'll sleep at night, or you'll sleep easier at night, because holidays get stressful. Well, they do in my family. I don't know if they do in yours, but but I hear that from a lot of people. It's a lot of work, and there's a lot of anticipation, and people want it to go right, but there's a lot of family dynamics and things with that. What do you think about getting feedback from everyone versus just those that are really in charge?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think everybody should be given a voice, whether your voice is recognized and what you suggest is taken or not taken. That's a different story. But I think just being shown that respect, that guys, I want to put together our, family Christmas tradition or Thanksgiving or whatever the tradition is. Does anybody have any input? This is what we're thinking of doing, and give those other people who may feel like their voice isn't recognized or even heard, let them know we're asking for your input. It doesn't mean we're going to accept it, but we want you to know we think enough of you, and out of courtesy, we want you to have input, and try to make the best of it. I always say, you mentioned, Lori, about people coming who may not know or haven't seen the loved one, whether it be a parent or whoever it may be. I always suggest too, trying throughout the year before leading up to the traditions, try to keep them in the loop. Now, whether or not they choose to be in the loop or not, that's on them. But you, as the quote unquote decision maker, the person in charge, or the person spearheading it, you're at least doing the right thing by including them. Whether they want to participate and be a part of it, that's on them. But I feel like you've done your job. I can't tell you how many times we have families where, one or two of the siblings are kind of the outliers, and they come around maybe every 5 years or so. And then they're shocked and surprised that, mom or dad is going through this or that, or this changed, and they didn't know. Well, they were sent the emails just like all the other family, but they choose not to really read it thoroughly or even read it at all. You can't be surprised, because the family has kept you up to date. And when you're trying to have a tradition, try to include all of your siblings or family that, has normally been a part of that tradition. But there's responsibility on their part too. You're the one throwing it, trying to put it together. You're asking for input, you're including them. But if they want to participate in the way that you're giving them the opportunity to do so, that's up to them. That's their decision also.
Yeah. Well, and some people are just going to be in denial, and you can give them all the information in the world, and they're like, no, they're fine. There's no changes. That's a very, very common thing too. I think also what we didn't mention specifically, and I think we should, is making sure that we include the senior in this. Now,
Oh,
it
wow.
might be where the family wants to kind of get a plan together before they approach it. Again, it's going to depend on where that person is at. Somebody might be totally able, cognitive, physically, the whole 9 yards, but maybe the family wants to get together and go, it's just time for some of our traditions to change, and maybe we should start taking this on at our house. And how are we going to approach that and make it a positive type thing?
Yeah.
it doesn't always have to be that there's something wrong, going on either.
Right.
I think that will help, the conversation be a little bit easier too, that gosh, you've been doing all this work all these years, we'd like to pick some of that up because we want our kids to see the work involved in all of this, and we want to train them to be able to do it and maybe approach it, kind of from that level, that traditional kind of handing off of things. And I think, and we've kind of touched on these before, but I'm just going to say it again, really thinking about specifics of your loved one, their physical health, that includes their mobility, that includes their tenacity, and how long they're going to last, all of those types of things. Their mental well-being, how do they do in gatherings? Are they sad? Are they usually joyful? What is their norm? Their cognitive abilities, knowing ahead of time, you had mentioned, what brings them joy and calmness, trying to create that and knowing what upsets them. And then also, I think, really noting triggers
Right.
within the family. So that could be family dynamics when Bob and Judy get together. Oh boy, there's going to be fireworks. Um, and nowadays we have politics and religion, and we've got so many things that have, the vaccines and things have pulled our families apart. Those have complicated things as well. So knowing what the triggers are, is it drinking? Is it food? Is it noise? Is it odors or sounds or overstimulation? Really looking at all of our senses, and it could be that, maybe we have a child in the family that's ADHD or has autism that could end up being the trigger for somebody else. Or it could be the tone of my voice that, just rubs somebody the wrong way. Knowing those types of things ahead of time, I think are important because then you can plan a little better, even where people are sitting and, if there's space or if you have smokers and non-smokers and, the list goes on when it comes to our families.
And I would even say relationship changes.
Mhm.
We had an example just a couple years ago during Christmas where the family was having a Christmas gathering at their dad's house. And it was very
Mhm.
impromptu, nothing over the top, but he had 10, 15 people show up, and quote unquote his favorite son, who of
Mhm.
course is the one that lived far away and was not real involved in the care and everything, but he was the favorite. We called him the prodigal son. He came, and the dad was trying to find, well, where is your wife? Him and his wife had separated earlier in the year, and he never told his dad. This is how his dad found out, and it devastated him the rest of the night. And it really destroyed the party and the festivities. And it, from a very joyous event that they were working on for a week or two, it turned into, it was more like a funeral than a celebration, and it was just heartbreaking. We, of course, we're not part of the family, we're just providing care for the dad. Our staff didn't know about anything about it, but that's how the dad found out, was at this Christmas party at his house, that his favorite son and favorite daughter-in-law had divorced, and he had no idea. And I just think, if there's news or surprises of the negative kind, or could be viewed as negative, prepare your loved one ahead of time, not the day of when the person shows up and you find out this person is no longer together, or anything devastating. Prepare your loved one. Don't surprise them like that, because it can really have dramatic effects on the rest of the event and the other people there too.
But that is a great point because there's lots of people in families that like my life, my business, it doesn't affect you. I mean, that's just kind of how they live their world. They're in their own little bubble. And yet, I believe we all affect one another.
Yeah.
And so and when it comes to especially traditions, and we're talking about family, that's talking about ties and community and belonging, something like that. Yeah, very devastating,
Right.
very devastating with something like that. So that's an excellent, excellent point because I have seen that happen. I know, and I'll just mention this for my mom with dementia. Like I got divorced. My brothers had ended up getting divorced. And my mom and dad were married for like ever. And we chose not to tell my mom because we couldn't explain that to her, no matter what. And but yet like our spouses were still part of festivities and they would still come. And so it didn't seem like they were missing. And I know not everybody can do that, but we all got along for the most part. And that made it a little bit easier. But they have relationships, with our loved ones as well. And I think that has to be respected too.
Right.
And
Yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
that's overlooked, or people like, what are you picking her for, over me? I'm your son, or whatever it is. And it's like, that's not what this is about. It's about individual relationships. It's not choosing somebody over another. Um, Let me see, what else did we have here? I was going to go into kind of travel, and we've kind of covered that. And again, people can go to the website, to get more detail. I mean, I think our panel, I think we talked for like close to 2 hours, and there's tons and tons of resources that people can find. We've talked about hotels. We've talked about packing. We've talked about, what we haven't talked about is gift ideas. Now, some families exchange and some families don't. Some people draw names, some people play a game and things. What are your thoughts about gifts for the? Let's just focus on for the senior
Yeah.
themselves.
Well, one, depending on how close the relationship is and how involved you are, you may have some really good ideas. Maybe, and you mentioned earlier, Lori, like even utensils or, two-handed cups with two handles, things that are, I'm big on practicality, what's going to make their life easier and more feasible for them to have their day-to-day, living activities and for safety.
Yep.
Maybe they need, nicer pajamas that are warmer. Maybe they need a nice bathrobe. Things that are going to help them with functioning, I think is always good. And then you can always add in something else. Maybe it's a Tony Bennett CD or, something that they can enjoy listening to or even engaging in. There's so many wonderful games now and, large print books, things that are very practical, especially if they're in a facility. I think it's even more so important because, they're very limited on what they can do and what's accessible to them. So finding those things that could really add some, engagement and value to their day. And like I said, clothes are always wonderful, especially, if they're, if they have accidents and they get stains and things like that. And then again, you can talk to siblings, maybe if they're more involved in mom or dad's care or whoever the loved one may be. If you have, caregivers coming to help them or staff in a facility, talk to them. Maybe one of the men in the facility has a great book that, your dad is always wanting to borrow or look at. Maybe get him a copy and find out what the book is, things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, those are all great things. I'm kind of a practical person too, but I always found like with my mom, she loved clothes. So we would always get something kind of special there. Or for Christmas, for example, she always liked her favorite perfume. So we always got her that. And that's a sensory item.
Yep.
So even when she couldn't put it on, we could put it on for her, and that was something she could enjoy. Or flowers, because that's something that can last a while. Family photos are always really nice, in a nice frame, and to be able to put those on the wall. Or maybe you get one of those picture frames that automatically rotates,
Yeah.
or maybe you can upload it even to their TV.
Right.
Or there's technology out there, like a grandpad always comes to mind, where you now can have a locked communication system where it's an iPad. So if they lose it, no one can take anything. There's nothing of value there, and they can't really even repurpose it. But you can decide who's in the circle. So no one's getting those scam calls, which again, we had a whole nother show on scams, which if you're interested in that, because that does peak during the holidays as well. Um, and then people could, and even when people aren't good with technology, there's ways for them to be able to text without having to text, where they can verbally do it, or someone can pop on the screen in a video communication, and they don't really have to do anything with it. So there's things like that. I found too, like with kids, if you've got small kids in the family, those homemade cards or little gifts, that usually just melts their heart to be able to have those displayed. And I think what people don't realize is, one, it's a trigger for them in terms of they're loved and they're part of a family, but it's also something they're really proud of when friends come to visit, that they are connected. Or little photo albums of families. They used to have those. I know my mom had her little one, and they would get together where she lived, and they would all show photos of their family and their grandkids and stuff, and that was special. I mean, maybe it's a holiday decoration, or a small little tree that they have. A favorite candy, my dad, we would always wrap up. I don't know if you remember those great big Hershey bars. I mean, they were like 5 pounds, it seemed like. I mean, they were like massively huge. And he loved his hunk of chocolate every day. He would get that. So knowing what they like, if it's music, or maybe it's entertainment, maybe you're going to take them to a movie or out to dinner, or even, I think when I was little with my folks, we would make up little cards like, I'm going to do the dishes, or I'm going to take out the trash, or being involved in terms of helping them out in different ways, and knowing that, bottom line, it's an excuse to come visit.
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of packaging it that way. So everything doesn't have to cost money. As my mom progressed, um, she really didn't need anything or want necessarily anything, if we would ask. But yet, when people were opening up gifts, it was important for her to have something to open.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I always, and I'm very big on time. I think
Mhm.
time is the best gift. And I just want to say real quickly, one, I was going to say coupon books, but you touched on that. But, it doesn't have to just be at the holidays or on birthdays. You can have an event for your loved one anytime you want, whenever you want, because it's about the time spent together, not necessarily the occasion.
Yep. Yep. Very true. Or if you know that time is pressing, I'll just throw this in. My dad had brain cancer, and we knew he wasn't going to make it to their 50th wedding anniversary. So we did a 49th and a half, and we pulled it together in 2 weeks, and we had like 250 people show up.
Wow.
And they renewed their vows because that was important to both of them. But again, strategizing on how you're going to pull all that stuff together, like the renewing of the vows was just immediate family, and we had a lot of people that were very upset they weren't part of that. But we also know everyone would have been crying. And so we had this small intimate group, and then we had this big joyous group coming in to celebrate. And it was just such a nice balance, between the two. So kind of knowing your purpose and the reaction, because that can make a big difference too. The other thing I want to talk about is coordinating help. We've kind of touched on it, but how do you pull people in? How do you con family and friends into helping when they haven't in the past? Or how do you find a professional, to assist?
Well, I'll start with family or friends. You know, my opinion is you never want to force somebody to help who doesn't want to help, and it might not be for a lack of wanting, but they could be afraid. They could be scared. I don't know how to change mom. I could never wash dad, or I don't want dad yelling at me. I don't want to see dad the way he is. That's okay, and that might not be for you, but there might be other things for you and how you could help. You could go online and order the groceries. You could coordinate the doctor's appointments. Set up transportation. to get them to and from appointments, set up house cleaning for them. Then look at professional help. You know, you can contact your local home care companies. I always stress to people, you know, because like here in Michigan, we're a non-licensed state. So Lori, you know, your granddaughter could be here in Michigan and say she's a home care company and she's well within her legal rights to do so. It doesn't mean she should. And you want to ask the tough questions. You know, are your employees fully direct hires or are they subcontractors? Do you cover your employees with workman's comp? Can we see proof of your workman's comp policy? Are they licensed? Are they bonded? Are they insured? Do you do full background checks? Are you willing to share with us the background check? Are they trained? Do they have experience? Ask those tough questions, because at the end of the day, just like when you're going to hire, not to belittle or, you know, minimize your loved one because they're an adult, but just like when you're hiring a babysitter for your child when they're little and they can't be on their own, you're not going to just let anybody come in the home to watch your child. You shouldn't let just anybody come in the home to help support your loved one. Ask those tough questions. You know, your local area agency on aging, like our company, we're a trusted, verified resource through them. So people know we had to go through certain procedures to be deemed that through our state and county, but not every company goes through that. You know, they can just say we're a company. Ask the tough questions, research them online, ask if they're willing to give, you know, referrals to families that are willing to speak to you about what their experience was like with them, you know, but start with family first, you know, talk to your family members. Usually there's one or two people that are kind of the head of it because a lot of the responsibility falls on them, and just say, look, if you don't want to be with mom and dad at the house, could you help me with these issues, coordinating, you know, like we mentioned, the groceries, appointments and things. That would be a big help in and of itself. Could you call mom at noon just to have a conversation with her, you know, things like that.
Yep, just checking in.
Just checking
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yep. Those are really important. And I think, you know, neighbors sometimes can be really helpful as well. People at church or book clubs or old work buddies or their social group too. I know I found that I wasn't honest with some of those other groups because I was over there kind of taking care of things. And as both my parents declined a little bit more, you know, I would make sure that they were all set up. So if they were going out with friends, they were well groomed, dad had money, you know, everything was good. And then they'd go out and they'd have a great time. And and then I would get upset when somebody would say something like, "Oh, come visit us in Texas." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, they couldn't do that. There's no way they could maneuver the airport or do any of those things." But they didn't see them in that light. And I never disclosed it because I thought I was protecting them. And yet people want to help, and it makes us feel good to help. And so by not informing people of reality, you know, we're taking that away from people, and a lot of times we're helping push relationships away and
Right.
breaking them apart, and we don't even know that we're doing that.
Absolutely.
um, and you know, I agree with hiring professionals, you know, get those references and things. And again, in our travel show, we talk about even travel companions that are, there's a certification now that's just started for that. But again, you could easily hire somebody from a home healthcare agency to do that. They may or may not know some of the ins and outs that an actual travel companion who does that full time knows. So, you know, take advantage of those things. And then I would say, while you're together, you want to make observations. And you don't want to be sitting there with a notepad so someone feels like a rat in a lab being observed, you know, on what's going on. But notice physical abilities, you know, communications and decision making skills. How social are they? You know, are they maybe depressed? Are they becoming more of a wallflower? You know, why are those things happening? You know, what does the house look like in terms of condition? Is there the pile of bills someplace? You know, wow, they didn't make their bed. They've always made their bed. You know, those are little signs that things have changed for somebody, or their hygiene, you know, could be an issue. And maybe it's that don't want to go down the steps to do the laundry, or they're scared to get in the tub because they don't have bars or they don't have a seat. Those are all things that can be remedied and changed. Um, what makes them comfortable or uncomfortable? Are they getting, are there personality changes that could be occurring with them? And then, their finances. And a lot of times they don't want to disclose their finances. A lot of that, for many, many people, that's a really private thing. But I think as we age, all of us, we have to live smart, and we do have to get things in order, if we don't want to be a burden to our family members. So having the will and the power of attorneys and healthcare directives, or even knowing who doctors and things are, we have to start being able to have those conversations. And I would say, don't start them at the holiday events, but plan for those, because again, your events during the holidays, I mean, I think for 99% of people, it's about joy. It's about coming together. It's about the feeling of belonging and feeling loved and supported. And so, we don't want to go on the attack. And even when we have those conversations, we want to do it in a respectful fashion. And one of the things I found with my own family when it came time to talk about wills and things like that, my folks said, "Oh, well, we just don't have that much. It's not that big of a deal." They were, modest means, and I said, "No, you have more than you know." And so what we did as a family, my husband and I said, "Well, how about if we go through the process with you?" Not meaning we're going to oversee what you're doing, but we're actually going to update our wills. We're going to get our healthcare directives. And then it didn't feel like an end of life thing.
Right.
We were doing it with them. And so there's alternative ways to keep the calm and talk about it, because we want everyone to feel independent and in control as much as possible with all of this.
Yeah. One thing I want to add too, Lori, because we talked about not surprising loved ones with big surprises or changes. Don't surprise guests with big changes. And what I mean by that is maybe there's that brother who's kind of more distant and isn't as involved or isn't in communication because they're, living a busy life. You don't want them to come and become shocked or surprised by the way the loved one is, the mom or the dad or whoever it is, and they weren't aware of it. Prepare people with what they need to know prior to showing up for the event so you don't catch them off guard either.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really, really good point. And again, if we are having those conversations ahead, asking people for input with things that can help. Or, I really like the new technology where you can say it once and push it out to everybody. So, and people can go back and kind of track things. You can even put information for, doctor's appointments and things like that. So everyone's kind of up to date. Again, every family is different. Some are going to be comfortable with that. Some are not. Some will be okay with certain people knowing, but not everybody. And that needs to definitely be respected. Well, I've learned a lot, just during our conversation. It's kind of amazing how many moving parts there are, with all of this. And you really have to take the time to slow down to think about it.
Absolutely.
If you want a successful gathering, or multiple gatherings. And then it becomes, I think, kind of old hat. You
Yeah.
just know that you have to be flexible. I guess I would also add in, have backup plans, or if things go sideways, just know there's a reason for that. Maybe there's a lesson in it for somebody, but, try not to blow your top over, "Oh my gosh, I knew this was going to happen," blah,
Right.
blah, blah, because that can easily happen with certain personalities. But again, you want to be respectful. If someone has an incontinence issue, it's not like they said, and just sat there and go, "I'm going to get him back right now on their favorite chair." I mean, that's not the way this works. you know.
Absolutely.
But so often, I think we tend to take things personally with things like this. And I guess last, I would just say, don't forget to capture the joy. So get the phones out. I know with our family, the kids are on the phone and the thumbs are going and they're texting. Assign them a role to be the picture taker,
Yeah.
or, go around and get videos and then have them put a video together. They love doing that stuff. But try to pull everybody in and capture the beauty, of the moments together, because you'll be really disappointed if you don't have those
Yeah.
afterwards.
My grandmother used to always say, one of the worst things to have in life is regret. Don't go to
Mhm.
the event, have a bad time. Maybe you get upset or say something because you can't take it back. And you don't want to
Yeah.
have that regret because there's probably far less events in this loved one's future than there aren't. And you want to just make the most of it and just go with it. Whatever needs to be done, just go with it and enjoy the day and enjoy the time with them while they're able to be a part of it.
Yeah. And maybe you're a family that does sing-alongs, maybe you're a family that plays games. Those can be a lot of fun. I know we did one, and we now it's part of our tradition, and it's with saran wrap, and you keep wrapping pennies and gift cards and notes, and all kinds of stuff gets stuffed into this, and you wrap and you wrap and you wrap, and it turns into this big ball. And then you pass it around with oven mitts, and you have to unwrap it and roll it. And I mean, everyone is screaming and laughing and going after things, and the timer's going. But it's one of those things that just pulls everyone together, and it's just hilarious. And what I'm explaining might turn one family off and go, oh my gosh, we would never do that. But for our family it works. So know what works for your family, uh,
Absolutely.
with that. So anything else that you can think of, Lance?
No, I think we covered it. And, I just mentioned to the viewers and listeners, if you have questions or you want to add to this list, leave them in the comments for us.
Yeah, please do, because we surely don't know all the answers. Nobody does.
No.
Everyone's situation is different. And again, feel free in the comments or going to our site, Conscious Caregiving with L&L. You can make a note to us in terms of comments that you have, things that you would like to have us see, cover in terms of our panel discussions. Or we're thinking, because we've been getting a lot of people asking, can you just answer this question, maybe before or after one of our panel discussions. So we want to hear from you. We want to be inclusive with this. And we've kind of decided that we can't really do that live because we have people all around the world, and it's just not going to work. And it'll be easy. And then with the number of people watching the show too, to be able to handle the amount, it'll be easier if you can write those things to us and we can address them in that fashion. But we really appreciate each and every one of you. We are just amazed at our following and the numbers of people watching the show. And we truly feel blessed and are so thankful that you're part of our community. So
Very.
thank each and every one of you. And we hope you have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today here at Conscious Caregiving with L&L, where we're tackling the tough conversations. Make sure to visit our website, consciouscaregivingll.com, for all the latest news and episodes. We look forward to seeing you next month.